When I was around 6, 7 years old, I started struggling with gender dysphoria. I think I should be a woman. That's where I feel more myself. And I'm a 7 year old, and I had to go through that for like 5 years without my parents knowing, without the church knowing, just kind of like battling that within myself. Then that kind of like transition into a homosexual struggle. And I'm living all of this and no one knows. I'm preaching on church, doing a lot of ministry, and nobody knows about this. I can't say anything because if I say something, I lose my family, I lose my church, I lose everything that I have. There is no chance that I'm going to be able to say something about this because there's so much in risk. If they knew who you really are, no one will love you. And deeply inside, just feeling like I'm just by myself, I'm alone. Like no one knows who I am, no one knows what I'm going through. And it's just a really lonely place to be at 15 years old.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today we are with Santi. He is originally from Colombia. We're actually half cousins. We want to talk about what God has done in his life and how he has battled through different situations since he was a kid. Yeah, really looking forward to this conversation, Santi. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm really excited to have a really good conversation today with you, Rafa. And yeah, hopefully people find something, I don't know, that they can take home with this conversation.
Sounds good. All right, so let's dive in. Let's start at the very, very beginning. Have you always believed in God, Santi?
I think that's a tricky question. I grew up in a Christian family, so I have to say that I grew up in a context where God was mentioned almost every day. And I think sometimes you can get confused in terms of, yeah, I've been close to God to some extent, but I do have to say that at some point in my life, there was kind of like a change. Well, I will have to say that it has been multiple times in my life that I kind of like encounter God in a different way, and then I'm like, is this the actual moment where I'm like actually believing in Him, or it's just been kind of like a long process. So I would say I don't know a God since the beginning, even though I grew up in a Christian home and a godly home. I think throughout the years I've been getting to know Him and I'm still getting to know him. So yeah, it's been a process.
It's a never-ending process, eh?
I know, I know.
If we met you 30 years ago, who would we have met?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in a family where all of them were leaders in a church. They were pastors. So I was born as a PK, and I think that sets a different kind of like label from like probably other people that grow up in Christian homes. I I was the firstborn of a big family, and I think that just led into a big focus on who I was and how I was behaving, even since I was like 5 years old. I think I grew up very aware of what people would think about me or say about me because of that kind of like whole system that we were having within the church, you know? So because I grew up in this context of Christianity, I quickly started to kind of like do ministry to some extent. Like I was with 13 years old teaching to the kids, you know, and like then I was leading Bible studies with young adults, and then I was in the worship team, and then I was preaching. And I think that was a really rushed kind of like career within the
Yeah,
church, you know, which I, looking back now, I'm like, that's not healthy. And please don't do that, you know, but that was my story. Like that was, and to some extent it felt good because I was like, oh, I was doing so much for God. I was like 15, multiple ministries, doing a bunch of stuff at church. Also, that was kind of like expected from me being the pastor's kid, just being really involved in church. At the end, I think it was really, really hard because I was going through a lot of struggles in my heart, in my head, while I was doing all these things. And I think, which I'm going to talk about that. But for now, I'm just saying, I think at some point you would meet just this person that was fully committed to the church, but a person that was basically hiding behind all this
wow.
activism and all these different things that you will do at church so that I was not feeling so bad with myself because of what was going on in my heart. So this was kind of like a facade that I was having, not intentionally. Like at 15 years old, you're not trying to kind of like do
Why would you?
something wrong,
Yeah.
you know? It's just yeah, it's just like how I grew up, and that's where I ended up being, just being. And I think when I think about myself 15 years ago, I think a lot about the Pharisees, like someone that knows a lot of Bible and it's really good imposing or kind of like asking people to level up to that measure. Well, I know I'm not there,
Wow.
but that was the normal way of doing church when I was growing up. So you would see this little kid, even though inside he's really really in a conflict. He knows a lot of Bible. He knows how to preach. He knows how to tell people what to do. And yeah, that to me, it's a Pharisee. Like that's, and I don't
Yeah.
know God completely. You know.
I think it's quite common to see, and it's quite sad, but it's reality. Like back in Australia or in the US, you see these big pastors of big churches living like, very Christian pastoral lives,
Hmm.
and they lead big churches. But then there's been a few scandals in the background where,
Hmm.
you live the perfect life, but in the background,
Yeah,
we'll struggle and we'll battle with things. You mentioned that you were battling through with a few things in your heart and in your spirit. So, would you be able to share what was your battle and how did you walk through
yeah,
the process?
sure. So it's been a long story, which is still going on, but basically, when I was around 6, 7 years old, I started struggling with gender dysphoria. It started just feeling like I was not supposed to be a man. I think growing up, there was like this constant, which could happen in any home, like I didn't have any abuse, I didn't have anything like really traumatic to some extent, but there was this kind of like trend where I would always identify myself a little bit more with my mom than with my dad.
Hmm.
I didn't feel like I was connected to my dad, and not in like a deep way, but just more like the things that we liked, the movies that we watch, the day-to-day life. Like I was feeling like I'm more like my mom. And I think
Hmm.
that kind of like got into this all these thoughts of I think I should be a woman. I think that's where I feel more comfortable, or that's where I feel more myself. And I'm a 7 year old, like that's just insane. But that's how the enemy works. And I had to go through that for like 5 years without my parents knowing, without the church knowing, just kind of like battling that within myself. After that, God, I feel like He did something in my brain. He did something that allowed me to be okay with my gender, allow me to kind of like be at peace with me being a boy. But then that kind of like transition into a homosexual struggle where in the first years it was just something in your head, like it's just something mental where you're feeling this kind of like attraction, you're feeling this kind of like, why am I needing men so close? At the beginning was more like this relational conflicts where I was emotional dependent on them, to my closest friends, and that was causing some issues. And I knew that I was like feeling something weird, which later on that turns out a little bit more sexual, and that becomes more like this sexual attraction to men. And I'm living all of this and no one knows. I'm preaching on church, doing a lot of ministry, and nobody knows about this. Just to give a little bit of context, which is also it kind of like to picture a little bit the way I grew up. In my church, there were some specific rules which I consider a little bit legalistic, and they were really, really. I think this is common in multiple churches, but my church was really strong with sexual sin,
Hmm.
and they kicked out a bunch of people because of sexual sin, specifically because of homosexuality. In the growing of that, I had two friends that they were also struggling with that. Both of them were kind of like kicked out of the church because they found out that they were homosexuals. So
Wow.
that brings a lot of pressure on not just only I'm having these kind of like weird thoughts. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling in my heart. At the same time, I can't say anything because if I say something, I lose my family because they are the ones like kicking out people. I lose my church. I lose everything that I have. So like there is no chance that I'm gonna be able to say something about this. because there's so much in risk, if I say something. And I think that the devil kind of like got a lot of plays into that. And kind of like the biggest lie that I had growing up was just if they knew who you really are, no one will love you. And that was years of feeling that way because, of course, I was a pastor kid. Everyone kind of like wanted to be my friend, or moms would say always like, "Oh, hopefully my daughter will get married with Santiago, whatever." And there was like all this whole like feast around, "Oh, Santiago is the best," and deeply inside, just feeling like I'm just by myself. I'm alone. Like no one knows who I am. No one knows what I'm going through, and it's just a really lonely place to be at 15 years old. Like it's a very lonely place.
Wow, Santi, first of all, thank you for opening up your heart and sharing and being vulnerable. Yeah, my respects to you, and also thank you for sharing, because having the pressure of being, the pastor's kid, leading different groups and like being the center of attention in church, but battling with that inside. How I have two questions for you. How
Yeah.
did you feel? Because it's not like you did this for a couple of months. You did this for a few years.
Yeah.
How did you cope with it, and how did you feel every day? And what was your relationship with God then? Did you pray with him? Did you say, "Hey God, why this happen to me?" Or I don't know what's going on. Like, how did you feel? How did you go through that process? That's my first question. And then the
Okay.
second one, when did you decide to share with someone for the first time? And how did
Hmm.
that go?
Two good questions. So going with the first one, it was a headache to be honest. Like it was really really bad. Something that I always have loved is doing theater. I love acting. I love dancing. That's something that really has a really big space in my heart. Sadly, I think I was able to use that as my coping mechanism to survive. Like I'm a really good actor, and no one like
Wow.
even thought that this could be happening. Like I'm just a really good actor. So I think that was the main thing. Just like I need to show that I'm okay always. Like I cannot show that I'm weak. I cannot show that I'm struggling. I'm always good. And I think I was pretty good at that for a couple of years, just acting like it was not there. And also I also mentioned that a little bit before, but my goal was like, of course I was talking with God. At that point, I'm like, okay, I think I have a relationship with him. I'm trying to be honest, those whole years were more about me praying about these thoughts kind of like disappearing. So my prayer was always like, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to feel this. Like take it out, like just I don't want to have this. At the same time, my hope to be okay with God was doing things at church. So anything that the church would say, like, oh, we need people for Saturday, we need people for this, we need people for that. I was all in always. I was like, I'm there, and like there was like this kind of like addiction to church of like maybe if I do enough things for God at church, then I'm not gonna feel as bad with myself because
Wow.
of the things that I'm having. So I think for long years that was what I was doing, just kind of like trying to suppress and trying to live if that was not there, just like I'm not gonna think about it. If I don't think about it, then it's not there, and I'm just gonna serve. I'm just gonna do ministry. I'm just gonna do everything that I can to serve God, hoping that at some point, then I'm gonna feel good enough because this is kind of like bad. Your second question regarding when did I open up? So when I was 17, I had my first sexual encounter with a man.
Mhm.
And as I already mentioned, talking out loud this was not an option because I was going to lose my family, I was going to lose my church. So I was like, I'm just going to not say anything and I'm going to live it like that for a long
Wow.
time. It was the worst year of my, well, all of those years were bad, but like that year specifically was like a headache. Like that was hell basically, because I was still preaching on Sundays. I was giving kids classes. I was on small groups teaching young adults, like I was doing all this stuff at church, knowing that I did this the first time that I did it. So the amount of guilt and shame, it's absurd. Like it's just a lot in your head. Of course, after 1 year of hiding this, I was about to explode. I was about to collapse. It was just too much for me to handle. So at that point, I decided to share this with the young adult pastor at the time in my church, which was part of my family because
Mhm.
everyone was in leadership. And I just said like, hey, I I did this a year ago. I'm really well, they didn't know anything, you know. So first of all, it was I had to share that I was struggling with the same-sex attraction, like this homosexual stuff, and also share that I had this sexual encounter with this guy, and I felt like I was gonna die. I was just like in a really
Wow.
bad place. Things were not ideal in how things happen. I don't think they were bad also, but I don't think they were the ideal for me. Basically, the response that I got was just like, "Thanks for sharing. You know that's sin." Talking about the homosexual part, so just don't do it again. And I never had any other advice, any other question about this. It was kind of like it
Wow.
was suppressed, and no one ever talked about this. Interestingly enough, which I'm thankful for, he never shared this with the whole family. I'm not sure why, but he didn't,
Mhm.
which was good because that allowed me to be a little bit more confident that I was not going to lose my family. But at the same time, like he didn't say anything useful, you know, like it didn't help me at all. Like saying like, "Oh, that's sin. Just don't do it." Like I know that, you know, like that's not new
Yeah.
information, and that's not helping.
The first portion of the conversation when you were just doing a lot of stuff to like working for God, serving the church, serving the people at church to try to be good enough, to try to level up because I don't feel good enough here. But if I do all of this, then I might level up. Let's avoid sexual sin for a second. But any sin, I think in church we try to do so many things for God that we try like if I do
Mm,
as many good works, maybe I'm saved or maybe God will forgive me. But then I understood the the word grace. There should be grace at the other side of the situation. So did you ever feel like, hey, I don't have to do all of this to feel loved by God, or did you ever meet the grace side of things from his side at this point?
so in that season, no, I encountered that grace and that like probably like around my 22nd year of life. But at that point, what like the season that right now we're talking about, no, it was weird because since I grew up in church, I knew all of these words, you know, like I knew the word grace, I knew the word mercy, I knew the word salvation, I knew the word like I knew how to preach the gospel, you know, like I knew it was not by works, I knew it was not. But if I look back now, I'm like, I was living by works, like I was completely living by works, you know, like if you're not at that point, I didn't had this clear, but like my value as a person doesn't come through what I do, like not even the love that God has for me, or yeah, anything about myself is just it's related to what I do for God. Like God is not expecting that. I didn't know that at that point. So at that point, it felt like the right thing to do, but also it felt completely exhausting. I was like, like I feel like every year that was going on, I was a little bit more exhausted of this because you know deeply inside that you're not feeling it. Like to some extent, you have to fake it because if you're doing all the right things, then it should go the right way. And for me, I was acting, so things were going well, but inside of me, I was just completely devastated. And as we get along, like after that, then I'm introduced to pornography. I
Definitely,
get
Santi.
addicted to pornography. There's just like all these things added up to my plate that I I was feeling tired every single year. I was like, this is not working. Like, even though I feel like I'm doing the right thing, which is serving the ministry, I was like getting to a place where I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna be able to sustain this too much, like not long enough. So yeah, at that point, it was hard because you are in a context where and also church seems to be a place where well, church should be a place where everyone feels safe enough to like show themselves. That was not the case. And when that doesn't happen, then everyone is just showing a good face. And then you have to keep up with it. You know, like everyone is okay. I have to be okay and like just keep up with it. And I think at some point, which is what happened to me, at some point you're just gonna collapse because you cannot maintain that for a long time. So that's how I felt.
And I feel like there's two things going on because you cannot keep up doing, and then you're facing church leaders, the church community, and everyone. But I'm really curious, how was your internal battle just with you and God? What was your dialogue with God? What was your conversation with God? Did you question him? Did you fought him? Did you cry for help?
Hmm. I think that's the most honest part of it because at the end, everything on the other side is like this big act that I'm like trying to display, you know.
As a big
And then
actor?
when I'm alone with God, there's like all these thoughts of, I think there were two main questions. The first one was why, you know, like I knew the Bible, like I knew that that was wrong, but having this sexual attraction is not a choice. It's not like I'm choosing to do that. It just lives within me, you know? And I think the main question that I was always asking God is like, why? Like if you are so powerful, if you created me, like why do I have to experience this? Like I don't get it. And the second big kind of like prayer was just for him to disappear this, for me, for him to remove this from my life. I think I got to put after kind of like this, what I just shared, I went to 3 years of really, really complicated kind of like depression because of that. And I was praying every night that God will take my life um, because like deeply inside, I knew that God didn't want that. And I didn't know how to not feel this. So I was just praying like, God, I'd rather be with you than having to deal with this every single day of my life. So I would wake up every morning and I would start crying because I was still alive. So it was really, really tough for a long time to just asking God like why the heck me, you know, like why the heck all this different thoughts like that I just don't want. I don't want them. Like it's not like I'm super happy with all these thoughts and I'm having my no, like I don't want what I'm feeling. Like I don't want what I feel for other men. That's not part of me. Like so it was complicated.
And did you probably, no, yeah, did you get an answer to that question, to that why?
Yeah, years later. I don't know if you want me to jump to
We'll get
to
later.
that,
Okay,
but yes,
cool.
but years later I did.
Wow,
Yes.
cool. And then you talk to this young pastor leader, you tell him, hey, this happened. And he's like, he didn't share with anyone in the church, which, as you said, probably that was a blessing on one side. But then he didn't also provide any help, or let's try to talk to someone, let's try to pray about it. What happened after that moment?
Yeah, so it was weird because nothing in terms of leadership, nothing happened. Like he never asked anything. Even up to date, he never asked anything. Like that was the first and last conversation we ever had. I want to believe that that was because maybe he's not equipped to have that conversation, which I think that's why I think leaders should be equipped in all these different things because this is really common. Like there's more people that you can be aware of that are going through this, and if the church is not providing anything, any help, any hope. It's really hard. I kept teaching, I kept doing the stuff that I knew how to cope with, you know, and to some extent happy because my family didn't know. A year later, well, God knows why things happened the way it happened, and a year later, because of some gossip around the church, there was this kind of like word that got to my mom about me being homosexual. So then my mom approaches me more like, what do you call that? Like more conflicted about why do people create gossip? Not because she didn't think that I was that, you know? So she comes in like, you can't believe what I heard. It's like, why do we have people saying this? Like, it's like kind of like upset about the church and how it was real conflicting to me because I was like, okay, what the heck am I gonna say? You know, like I had two choices. Like I could either keep my lie of, oh yeah, that's terrible. Like why? Or be honest and say like, Well, more than a gossip, like that's an actual struggle that I do have. That was the longest minute of my life, just deciding what the heck am I going to respond to my mom.
What do you do?
Um, I did say the truth. I was like, hey,
Wow.
um, the truth is that I do have this struggle. And it was hard for her. Like she didn't know how to kind of like receive that. I think she did well, like I think the previous generation to mine didn't have a lot of resources to handle this. And I think
Mhm.
given that situation, I think they did a good job of like loving me and yeah. But I think they were not equipped to help me. So she, after kind of like asking me some questions, she also shared that with my dad. And both of them were supportive in terms of, hey, we love you. We want the best for you. But also at the same time, just like, we don't know how to help you. Like we don't know what to do in these cases. Also because previously, before that, their go-to was to remove these people from the church. And I think when they encounter that it's their own son, I think they don't have resources, like that's not an option. So I think they feel these like, we don't know what to do. Like this is just beyond what I what we can like we what we know how to handle. So yeah, I think for them knowing, for me that every time that someone knew, I was just a little bit more at peace.
Yeah.
Still with a lot of problems, still with a headache, with all these issues, not wanting to wake up. But in the midst of that, I feel like every time that I would share a little bit of this, it felt like, oh, like, okay, like I didn't lose my family, I didn't lose my parents. Like they know and they love me. I still don't know what to do, but they love me. And it felt like a good place to be, even though it's not the ideal. It felt like a good place to be at that point in time. But to be honest, I didn't have any resources. I didn't have anything for me to do. So it just went down. From there, I just went down with my addiction, with my sexual sin, with my thoughts. It went down to the place where I was just, at some point, I just didn't want to keep following God because it just didn't make sense.
Why did you leave God? Why did you leave the church at that point?
So, so no, in terms of timeline, I talked with my mom at 19, and
Uh-huh.
this is happening at 22. So I kept
Oh,
that
okay,
for
okay, okay,
three
okay.
more years.
Wow.
And those 3 years were like the ones that like I was praying so that God would take my life and like all these things. So it was going worse and worse and worse, like 3 years of keeping up with the church work, and but the deeply inside feeling the weight of the sin, shame, and not really knowing what to do with everything that I'm feeling. So at some point, and that happened also when I was preaching on Sundays, like I would preach about God's love, I would preach about grace, I would preach about all the all these things, and then I'll come home and be like, I don't feel anything of this.
Mhm.
Like I don't know where his love is. I don't know where his grace is. Like I cannot keep doing this. Like I cannot keep teaching about something that it's not true for me. So yeah, it was like this conflict of, in the theory, God and the Bible sounds amazing. It's beautiful. And I think that was what I kind of like expressed to God, just like, you're amazing. Like everything that it said there, the ideal world, like it's great. I don't hate you. It's not working for me. Like I don't know what to do with this. This clearly is not what you want from me. I don't know how to take it away. It doesn't go away. It keeps being there. I cannot stop feeling it, even if I wanted to. So at some point I was just like, it just doesn't work. It just, even though it seems beautiful and seems pretty, what the Word of God says, it's just, it doesn't integrate with my life. It's almost like the Bible was not made for people like me.
Mhm.
The Bible was made for other people with other struggles, but the Bible was not made for me. So
Yeah.
it's just better for me to just go my own way and not keep trying something that it's impossible for me to like take this out of myself. So I'm just not gonna keep doing this.
You mentioned you went through deep depression. How would you define depression? You were saying like I didn't want to wake up. I just wanted God to take my life away. How was that battle? Did you ever feel like close to, I don't know, suicidal thoughts?
Yeah. Well, just to give context, I think I can identify the depression. I could identify my depression later on. Like at the moment, it was not diagnosed, and I didn't know within that moment that that was depression. I think it was years later that I figured out that what I was
Okay.
going through was a big depression. So the way I never had the temptation of like commit suicide or anything like that. I just feel like personally I just didn't have the courage to do it. So that was not an option for me. That's why I was like, my go-to was just praying that God would do it for me
Yeah.
because I didn't have the courage. So my prayer was just, God, if you want, like, then I bring all these biblical words, and then it's like, oh, you're the owner of life. You're the one who gives life and take it away. And like, if you want, you can take away my life. And I'm, like, it's absurd how like then you take all these like Christian words and then you make them yourself so that you can achieve what you want. So yeah, for me, it was mainly like really not wanting to live, really not wanting to keep going, and also really alone at this point. Almost no one knows, like just like one friend. So you feel really, really alone and exhausted because outside of your room, you have to be someone else. You have to be someone that you're not. And I think that's hard because when you're someone that you're not, then God cannot meet you there because God wants you to meet with who you are, not with who you're not, you know? And I think that's something that I had to learn through like trying to be someone that I'm not so that God will accept me. Well, this whole those whole years where God was expecting me just to be myself so that he can meet me those places and not in a place where I'm not, you know. For me it was just like I don't want to leave. I don't want to do these things, but I'm a good actor again. So I just kept going. I was like, let's go out, let's do ministry, let's do. I was in school at that point, just doing all the stuff that I need to do. And then I come back to my home and I cry at night and then I go to sleep. And that was
Yeah.
kind of like my routine every single day. So yeah, very dark places.
Even though it was very dark and probably very sad and like a huge challenge, you mentioned that when you open up with your mom and then she shared with your dad the longest minute of your life, but you made, I think, the right choice, sharing with, because
Hmm.
if you cannot share who you are and your struggles with your own, parents, then you're really alone. So, and I think it's really beautiful to see your dad and your mom supporting you. Like, I don't know what to do, but I'm here to love you. I accept
Hmm.
you, and let's try to do something about it. It's interesting how every time we confess sin or we confess, our struggles, we do feel lighter, because as I was sharing before our conversation, I did struggle with other sexual sins, pornography addiction. I shared this with a friend in Australia, and I feel like, okay, I'm not alone now. And I talked to my friend, and then it's like, oh, let me pray for you, let me do this. He showed me some programs, or like, I felt like I was not alone.
That's a big biblical truth. Like there's this two concepts of I confess my sin to God for forgiveness. But then James has this concept, I think it's James 5:16 or somewhere around that, where it says like share your sins to your brothers and sisters so that you can be healed. And there's
Wow.
like these two differences from like one thing's for me to be forgiven and like to be at peace with God because God forgives us when we sin, and that's true. Doesn't matter what. But another side of the story is for me to be healed. I do need community and I need people that love me and know who I am and know my sin. So it's beautiful how God creates at the end, like what it's supposed to be community, which in most cases, churches, I don't think they act that way.
Hmm.
And they're more prone to point out their sin and to judge than like actual loving and restoring people because that's the at the end something I learned later on, kind of like spoiler. Like I need people, like I need people to be in my life. I need people to know who I am. I need people to know my sin because that's how God heals. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how that works.
There's a portion where Jesus says that I came to heal the sick and not the ones who
Mhm.
are already healed, or
Hmm.
something, like, the people who are
Yes.
broken, the people who are sick.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to be more like Jesus, it's really easy to be Jesus like when everything is perfect. Like, in church, everything looks
Yeah.
perfect. We should be able to love, the broken and
Mhm.
the person who is sick and the person who is needy. And that's the real
Yeah.
gospel. So, but I do
Yeah.
agree that sometimes churches, like it's like a wall, and as soon there's sin, there's like, a lot of fingers pointing at sin. So,
Yeah.
but then, okay, you mentioned community, you mentioned friends, you talk to your parents, and we don't know what to do about this. So what happened after that? Did you cry for help, or what happened after?
Well, God knows how he does everything at the end.
Yeah.
So, just to give context, years before this, I had another friend at church. We were both kind of like doing the same thing, like teaching, preaching. Like we were kind of like pairs in terms of all the things that we had in terms of functions and roles at the church.
Hmm.
And he, one day he never came back to church. I didn't know why. I was like, that's weird. Not really sure why. Few months later, someone else told me that he decided to live his homosexual life and that he didn't want anything to with God, which was a surprise for me because on one side I was like, that's so sad that we both were struggling with the same thing and we never talked about it and I didn't know that, and I was serving, leading stuff beside him. I mean, we were going through the same thing, like we could had supported each other. That didn't happen, but that's just a
Mm.
fun fact about how churches work.
Yeah.
And so he leaves, he goes and does his own ways, his homosexual life. Years go by, I'm doing this, I'm getting to this place where I don't feel hope. And then I remember well that it was a Monday where I decided to not keep going with this. And I told God, like, hey, this is not for me. I'm sorry, but I'm just leaving. I cannot do this anymore.
Mhm.
And then Thursday, after this Monday that I made my decision, they told me that my friend had died of HIV, and I think that was one of the hardest things I had to go through. And I feel like at the funeral, there was kind of like these words from God, like, if you leave, same thing happens to you.
Wow.
Like, so on one side was good because my rebellious time was like 1 week. It couldn't go too long. On the other side, it was really hard because I was like, okay, I of course I don't want to end like that, but I also don't want to keep doing what I've been doing for this whole years. So I told God, like, I I'm willing to come back if things change. Like I cannot keep doing this. Like this is not like I'm not able to sustain this. I'm not able to keep doing this. And at the same time of this, I heard of an institute, like Bible Institute in the US. Some friends had taken it. They told me that it was really good. I was going through a phase where I was like, I might take just a break from school and do this. My parents were also really supportive. And they were one of the main ones that told me, like, hey, we don't know how to help you, but maybe they know how to help you.
Mhm.
And maybe it would be good for you to go. So after long considerations, I decided to go. And I think that here's where the story becomes a little bit more interesting, even though it's already a lot. But when I see back to when I decided to move to the US and to this Bible Institute, I realized that my inner, well, it took years now, but now I'm considering that at that place where I was a really good guy. Like I didn't like my struggle wasn't alcohol. My struggle wasn't girls. I didn't like. There's all these good things I was doing. My little tiny problem was that I was attracted to men.
Mhm.
So my hope was that if I go to this institute, then he can remove this struggle, and then I don't have any issue. You know,
Mhm.
which you can imagine how it ends. But yeah, so I go to this institute, and I think being there I think that has been the biggest year of my life because it completely changed who I was and how I saw God. And it brought life where there was no life because I just wanted to die.
So, what's the process of taking someone who comes to this institute? If you could describe for someone who has no idea what happens when you get there, the first day, the first week, the first 3 months, what happened during that year?
First of all, before I share this, I think it's important to say that I don't think the solution for everyone is going to Bible school. I think that's very important to clarify.
Mm.
I think God has a purpose and a process with each one of us, and some of us we need it, and some of us we don't need it. So I think, and I say this because I have encountered a lot of people that are hoping for this opportunity to go and be by just focusing on studying the Bible and stuff like that, and they might not be able because of financial reasons or because of priorities in their lives. They have kids, like it's just not sustainable. I don't know. There's just all these things, and that's why I want to clarify that I don't think the solution for everyone is to go.
Mhm.
I do think that part of what I lived there is something that anyone could live anywhere where they are at. I
Mhm.
think for me, God needed to take me out of my context to heal, and
Mhm.
that was for me.
Mhm.
So as I said, I go there. There, I think at the end is God, because even the institute is not promoting themselves as, oh, we can help you in your problems. They're just saying like, hey, come here. We are going to study the Bible for a year from the lens of discipleship, and we have kind of like these immersive courses, and you're going to live with other students, and God will do something in your life. And that's where I go, like, okay, let's do this. Like, I'm ready to learn more about ministry because I was already preaching. I was doing all these things at church. I was really good at it. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep equipping myself
Yeah.
and something like that. What I didn't plan, or what was not on my plan that happened, was within the first months of the institute, they tell us that we were gonna have a camp, and we were going out, all the students, for this 3-day kind of like retreat. And I was like, oh, amazing. I love retreats. This is super cool. And then what they say is that this retreat, there were no teachings at this retreat. No one was going to teach at this retreat. The only thing that we were going to do was, one by one, you're going to go up front and you're going to share your story and your struggles. And I was like, there is no way, there is no chance I'm going to do this. Like, what the heck? So I go straight to the director of the institute, and I was like, there's no way. Like, I'm not going to share anything. I barely have shared this with my parents. I'm not going to share this with 20 girls, 20 boys, teachers. I'm not going to do that. Like, there's no way. And he was very loving. And he said, it's okay. You don't have to say anything that you don't want to.
Wow.
If you just want to say your name, that's fine. Now, if you ask me for advice, which you're not, but if you ask me, I would share everything.
Hmm.
You decide whatever you do. So that's like 3 weeks before the retreat that they tell us this. So I started, those 3 weeks were life changing, because then I had kind of like this mentor who was a pastor in another church, which I owe a lot of my growth to him, because he was kind of like the one who started discipling me through this. So I said like, hey, I shared this with him. I was like, uh, they want me to share this, and I don't think I want to share my story. He knew my story, because if at least with my heart, I was like, if I'm going to this place, I need to tell someone there, because I'm gonna get to a place where no one knows about anything about me.
Mhm.
So I was like, at least I want to share my story with my mentor so that he can help me, because at the end, part of me wants for this to be solved.
Yeah.
So someone needs to know. So I did share this with my mentor, and then I shared that we're gonna have this retreat and that we need to share. And he said, I'm gonna give you homework before anything. I need you to write down in a piece of paper your story. And I was like, cool, I can do that. And he said, we're not deciding if you're going to share it. I just want you to write it down. And I was like, cool, I can do that. That was the hardest homework I've ever had, because writing it down meant that I had to accept that that was my life,
Mm.
which was something that I never wanted to accept.
Mm.
I, it was years of hiding it and acting like that was not there so that I could be at peace, and writing that down for myself and saying like, this is my story, like this is who I am, and this is where I'm at this point. I cried like for 5 days writing that down. I was like, this is insane, like how much it cost me to accept that this is where I'm at, because I wanted to be this Jesus 2.0
Yeah.
that was great preacher and the leads Bible studies and a church is great and all of these things. But if I write that down, then I'm not that Jesus. I'm a broken person. And having to accept that I was broken was the hardest things of, and I think that's where everything started. I shared that with my mentor, and he's like, "You're ready. You can take that paper."
Oof, just ready.
And yeah, he said, and you can decide there. You just take your paper with you, and when you're there, you decide if you read it or if you don't read it.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. So I go there. I was about to throw up. I was like realistic. I was like, this is not good for me. And something interesting about the dynamic was that they will share the order in which each one of us will go up front. And I was number 7 out of 40.
Okay. Wow.
So then I go there and I'm like, can I be like number 25 or number 30? I don't want to be number 7. And they're like, no, we feel like God wants you to be number 7, so just go for it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want it. At the end, I I decided to read the whole paper to my class, everything. Um, I read that out the first night. It was three nights. The first night I was, yep, I read all of it. And the next day, well, not even the next day. After that, we had dinner, and I felt something that I had never ever experienced before, which was God's love. Like these people knew me, and they still chose to love me and talk to me.
How good.
They knew everything about me. They knew the worst things that I've done, and they decided to still be with me. And I just cried the whole night. I was just like, why? Like, what the heck is this? Like, these whole years growing up with this lie from the enemy about they will hate you if they know who you are. So the biggest fear is there of like, this is what I fear the most. And then I share this. And it's like nothing happened. Like everyone was just like, Santi, come here, Santi, whatever. Not even asking me about like, oh, why? No, like it's just another day. And they're loving me. And I think that was the first time that I really, really felt God's love, like in a tangible way. And I was like, this is insane. Like I've never ever experienced this before. And I think that was the opening of the multiple things that happened throughout that year that God started to change. On one side, remove some of the lies that I had in my head, but also showing me that I'm not Jesus 2.0. I'm just a broken human being that
Wow.
needs God. So yeah, there are more stories about that year, but that's how it started. And then just what we talked about, like life, like community was a huge part of healing and just understanding like this is what God meant for us, like to be known and to be loved and to be fully known so that we can be fully loved.
Wow.
Because you're not gonna be fully loved if you're not fully known. So for you to be able to feel God's love, you need to be fully known so that you can be fully loved.
How good,
Yeah.
Santi. How good, and it makes me think and reflect on, like, if we want to be more like Jesus, and we were briefly talking about this before, like it's easy, like, you can just show kindness and grace and love towards anyone out there who's struggling, but I don't know why. I don't know if it's part of our human nature that we just want to point fingers. We just want to say, hey, you're bad and I'm good. We
Yeah.
just want to throw the stone. But like, and it's so good that this guy said, hey, like, no pressure, but my advice is, if you share your story, then something great might happen. You wrote it down, and I think the process of writing, it's so healing, and I think that's why, probably
Mm,
this is a different conversation, but the journaling practice is
mm,
really good, because you face yourself with your thoughts and where you are at and what you want, and
mhm.
like, so, and I'm sure those 5 days when you were writing this down, it was really, really hard, but kudos to you for doing it, and then for being so brave to, showing up and sharing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good reflection of, sometimes we're so afraid of jumping off, because we're afraid of this might happen, but
Mhm,
actually nothing happens, and actually better
mhm,
things start to happen. I think probably that was the first, or maybe the second portion of your healing process, after you told your mom, and now you
mhm,
told a bunch of a community, a class, and then everyone is accepting and loving and caring. and then you were like, okay, I can start working with this.
Yeah.
So that was your first moment, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens after? Like, did you feel like, okay, I'm good? How was your conversation with God changing at that point in time?
Yeah.
Like, what happened after that?
A lot of things. Well, I think the two main things were I go back a lot more relieved, like lighter, of course, in terms of I'm not carrying this huge like past alone, but I'm still struggling
Yeah.
and I'm still having this issue. Like I don't want to have this, and like I don't want to like, and I'm on these first months, I'm trying really hard for God to like heal me because that's why I travel. Like that's why I moved to the US so that God can heal my struggle. There was one specific day that it will always be in my memory, which to be honest, I don't know if I have a point where I became a Christian, but if I have to point at one day, it would be that day. I think, as I said at the beginning, we know God throughout. We keep knowing God as we keep living, and I think each step is just a step closer to God. But I do think that in that moment was special because I was going through kind of like some anxiety in terms of all these thoughts in my head that I'm still not healed. Like I've been here 3 months and I'm still kind of like struggling with all of this. And I told my mentor, we go for lunch, and then we were at a park. And I told my mentor that I was just exhausted, that I was just not doing the things that I was supposed to do. And the things that I'm supposed to do, I'm not doing. And then I'm just committing sin and I cannot stop. And I don't want to be feeling this. And I don't want to be thinking this. And I want to think something different. And I want to hope for something different. It was like 40 minutes of myself just sharing this frustration with myself of like, why do I keep doing the things that I don't want? Like, why am I having these thoughts? I don't want to have these thoughts. I want to think something else. After my 40 minutes of me just sharing out my brain and my heart, he very respectfully said, "Hey, can I ask you one question?" And I was like, "Of course, just like ask me whatever." And then he asked me, "Are you a Christian?" And I was like part of me was very angry. I was like, "How dare you?"
Yeah.
Like I've been in this thing for like
Yes.
22 years, and now you're asking me if I'm a Christian. Like, but the other side of me was like very curious. I was like, why? Like from all the questions that he could ask, like, why is that the question that he wants me to answer? So I was really confused in my head. I was like, why? Like, so I just said, well, I want to believe I am. Like, I've been in this for 22 years. Like, I don't know. I hope I am. Kind of like showing intentionally doubt, but
Yeah.
internally feeling like, oh, of course I am. But
Yeah.
like because he asked, I'm just gonna bring some doubt into the conversation to see what happens. And then he said, yeah, okay, I understand. My I do this question because for the last 40 minutes you've been talking about yourself. And when you're a Christian, a life of a Christian should circle around Jesus. The center of a life should be Jesus. And this in this 40 minutes, nothing has been about Jesus. It's
Oh,
just about you. And I think at that point I realized like, what the heck am I doing?
yeah.
Like, it's true. Like, it's just about myself. It's just about who I am, who I want to be, and not about Jesus. And he's like, the purpose of being a Christian is that Christ is at the center of your life. And
Wow.
I don't think he's at the center of your life right now. So I start crying. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Like, I thought I was, and I don't know if I was, but at this point, I'm kind of like having this huge encounter with him, which led to this incredible process of basically God showing me that my homosexual life was the least of my problems,
Wow.
and that I'm a huge sinner. Like, I'm a professional sinner, and homosexuality is just a small part of everything that is in my life. And that's why Christ died for me,
Oof.
because he wants to have relationship with me, and he wants to restore my life. But again, as we said, God came for the sick, not for who is healed. And I think I had to get to that place where I was just a sinner, and nothing good was within me, so that He can come and save me. Um, I remember one of the biggest things was, since I was also struggling with addiction to pornography and all of this, my mentor, my mentor was a really wise guy at that moment with me, at least, because he one day he tells me like, there is this group that meets on Friday for addicts, for drug addicts, and for alcoholics. I think it would be good for you to go.
Wow.
And I was like, for me? I'm not a drug
Why?
addict.
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic. Like,
Yeah.
and he said, I just think it would be good, but it's your choice. If you don't want to do it, it's fine.
Yeah.
It took me 3 months thinking it every single Friday, like, should I go? No, I'm not going. And every Friday I was like, no, I'm not gonna go. And after the 3 months, I was like, I think I need to go. I don't know why, but I think I need to go. And I understood that when I was there with a bunch of drug addicts and alcoholics, this whole struggle was hoping that I was just not one of them. Like I was better, you know? And when I was there as another addict, I was like, I'm not better than them. Like I'm just one more, like it could look different, but at the end we all are broken. And I think that's where God starts kind of like really digging into my sin and going beyond sexual sin, going like to my pride, to my um self-centered life, um, to all these different things that are part of who I am at that point, which I feel like I'm good and like Jesus 2.0. Um, and it's just basically God destroying of those lies and all of those and just showing me where I'm at and how ugly my heart is. At a place where I was just like, I need to surrender. Like, I'm just a mess. Like, there's nothing good in me. Before I thought that everything was good and that I just needed to heal this part, but no, everything within me is bad.
Broken. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as humans, we tend to point fingers and say, if you killed someone, it's bad. If you steal, it's bad. But I don't know much about the actual definition of sin. But I think all sin is sin. We're all broken. I do feel like, of course, like our human logic or our human sense, we tend to say, hey, like we tend to categorize, and we tend to put like on a scale, this sin is better than this and this is worse. But at the
Hmm.
end, we're all sinners, and we're all
Yeah.
broken, and we all need Jesus, because we cannot do it on our own strength, right? And I think as Christians, I do tend to fall into this habit sometimes where I want to be more like Jesus, and Jesus was like amazing, right? I'm like, okay, I'm really good compared to that person. Compared to that person, I'm really good
Yeah.
because But at
Yeah.
the end, I've realized to a point, like I'm as equal and as equally broken and as equally sinner to anyone that is around me, and I cannot do anything if I'm not close to Jesus, if I'm not having that
Mm.
relationship with Jesus. So
Yeah.
when you shared your testimony, when you talk to this guy, when you go to this alcoholism and drug addiction center, you were like, okay, I'm not, I'm just another broken who needs Jesus, and who needs healing.
Mm.
At that point in time, how was your relationship with God? Like, because we've been talking about your relationship with God at the beginning. Why did this happen to me? Then
Mhm.
you confess your sin, then you decide to leave church, but then not even after a week, then this happens, and then you go to this institute. But how was your conversation with God evolving? And then in this point, what happened? Like, okay, I feel loved, I feel accepted by this community. But how did you feel loved and accepted with God at that point in time?
I think it was changing. It was a different conversation at this point because I think for a while I stopped the question of why. You
Hmm.
know, at some point it was just like I don't know why still, but I'm feeling his love. I'm feeling a closer relationship, and I think that leads to a better conversation around like what does Jesus mean to me? Like what does like the fact that he saved me. is that actually changing my life, taking into account the sexual sin or not, or whatever, like it goes beyond that, like God sent Jesus to die on the cross for my sins. Doesn't matter which are those, like you have ones, I have others. I think at some point, and I think on those first steps, the problem was not if it was homosexuality or what, but just recognizing how much I needed him and kind of like getting into this humble place of God, I cannot do anything without you. Like, I'm just a sinner. I don't like, we can name multiple sins in the list, but how can I approach this God that also had his own, like, the grace of allowing me to understand this, like, I could have lived for a long time in the other place, and the fact that he, with his mercy and love, placed me in the right place and surrounded me by the right people. All of these little steps were God showing me his love and telling me like, hey, I want to have a relationship with you and I love you the way you are. Like like I'm not expecting you to change anything. And I think that was the biggest change at that point, just like giving me the freedom to get close to him or to approach him without expecting from myself to be different or to not have something, like which was my issue at the beginning. Like I want to remove this so that I can be X, Y, and Z. At this point, it's like, no, I don't have to remove anything. Like that's the principle of our relationship with God. Like I think it's blessed the ones that are broken spirit, and I think that's the problem of that's the goal. Like we should all be broken spirit because those are the one who inherit God's kingdom, and that's why Jesus came here. So I think the conversation was more about me knowing now God, not about myself, not about if I'm doing or not doing or whatever, but just like he accepts me, he loves me, and now I can talk with him freely and without guilt and shame. So it was very different, very, very different.
Also, this guy asked you this very simple question, which sounds very, why would you ask that? Are you a Christian? But I believe, and I'm not anyone to judge anyone, but I feel in our churches we're full of Christians who say that are Christians, but we are not real Christians.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have Jesus at the center of our lives, and I think that's a really good call out. Whatever you are in
Mm,
life, just look at Jesus and try to live around him, not around you. It's not about you anymore, it's about him. So how can we live for him? How can we serve him? How can we
yeah.
love him? And at the end is how can we love others, right? So you do that, you share your testimony, you get closer to God. Your relationship with God, it's in process, and it's not more about you, it's about your relationship with him, and it's more about him. Is there anything else that happens during this year in this institute, or did you go back to your church? Do you go back to your normal life? Do you feel like, okay, I'm done and dusted? Like, what was the outcome after finishing this institute?
Two more things happened
Hmm.
towards the end of my year there, which was kind of like a closing of this season with God. And they're both are kind of like connected, and it's still there's this question of I want this to disappear. Like even though I know I'm accepted, even though God loves me, whatever, it's not fun to have this. Like I'm not having a great time having this. So I needed to remove it. Like thanks God for like loving me, accepting me. That changed my life. But now let's get to business, and I need you to remove like what I'm
Yeah.
feeling. And I think throughout different conversations, scripture, combination of all of it, I think we got to the root of all my sin, which was basically he told me no. Said I'm not gonna take that out of you. And I realized that if he if he removes that from my life, then I don't need God anymore.
Man, that's dense.
Um, and then I realized how my main sin is not homosexuality. is that I just don't want to depend on God. And I will do whatever I can to not depend on him. Kind of like what Adam did in at the beginning, like sometimes it's just because I don't trust fully God, sometimes because I feel like I have a better plan. And I think I think that's when I realized that the goal in Christian life is not being perfect, because being perfect leads to not needing God. The goal in Christian life is dependency. Because if I depend on God, then I'm closer and I'm in relationship with God, because I cannot do anything without him. And that was my sting. That was what gave me, or not gave me, but like allow me to experience, so that I remember that I need him. Because there's high chances that if he takes this out, I'll be good on my own, because I'm pretty good person, or that's what I want to believe sometimes. So I think that leads to this kind of like understanding of how much I hate being a creature that depends on someone else, that I just want to be my own God. That's
Wow.
the actual root of my sin. And that's what any other sin that I have in my life comes out of that. Just
Mhm.
that I want to be God, that I want to be my own God who leads my life and who does whatever I want.
Wow.
And within that, the same mentor, he told me one day, like, hey, we're gonna start this new series at church about brokenness. And I would love for you to share your testimony at church. And I'm like, wait, wait, wait. So I already did it with 40 people. Now you're asking me to do it with 400 people at church
Wow.
that I don't know. So again, we go into the same cycle. Like, I'm not sure if I should do it. He's like, no pressure, but I think it would be good for the church to hear this. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I end up doing this. And it was on a Sunday. At that moment, this church had between 300 and 400 people. I do something like this. It was more like a conversation, and I go up there and I share my testimony about homosexuality and about this big realization of how my sin is actually that I want to be God, and that I hate depending on God. I share of this, and something interesting that happened, which led to my next season later on, was at least three people came to me after it, and they said, I also struggle with certain sex attraction, and I've never told anyone. I just wanted to share with you because I know you're going to understand me. And that broke my heart, because I realized how much pain there was in other people, just as in my life.
Wow.
Which I think is also part of why I'm doing this. There's a lot of people going through this, and it's horrible. It's a headache. It's really, really complicated. And I think that opened my eyes to understand that God, even if he doesn't take this away ever, he can use this so that other people can experience healing and can experience his love, just as he's doing it with me every single day. So I think that's when it opens the door that I was not aware of. And I think that was kind of like the closing of a year, just understanding how bad I am, how needed of God I am, and also in the place of brokenness, how God can use a broken person to heal someone else and to bring hope and to bring love, even if I don't have anything resolved at this point. Like, I'm not perfect still, and I am not hoping to be. I still have a lot of struggles. I still struggle with some same-sex attraction. God is good is the only thing that I know. So yeah, it was very, very good that year.
Wow. This is work in progress, but I do feel like that could be a very strong calling, a very strong purpose, a really strong, I don't know, like a ministry around it. Like, back to that question, why? You've got so many talents, you've got so many gifts that God gave you, but then you also have this struggle. And as these three people came to you, probably he's going to use you, or he's been using you, and he will use you, to help heal, to help love, to help accept. I don't know what's the shape and how is it going to look like, but maybe it's somewhere around. So you go back to you go back home, you go back to church, you go back to family. Do you tell other people in the family? Do you tell the rest of church?
And so after that, I go back to, well, I come back to Colombia, and it was an interesting experience because I knew that I was different, and I knew that, and I also knew the context that I was going back to, which was not the best. I had different reactions into like, why am I so different? People not loving that version of me, other people really loving the new version of myself. I think for me it was amazing because for the first time in Colombia, I was not acting. I was not having this performance that I had for long years. I was just being myself. I was showing emotions. I was like, if I was frustrated, I would show that I was frustrated. If I was happy, I was showing that I was happy, which was a great accomplishment for myself, just being myself in the midst of where I was. Sadly, things didn't work out with that church. I think we were just on different places at that moment. And I felt like God told me that that was not the place for me to kind of like keep growing and doing the ministry that we just talked about. Like there was just a lot of things, and I also think not all churches are ready to have this conversation.
Mhm.
So it was good for me to recognize that that was not the place for me. But on the other side, what happened was that I got a call from one of my teachers from the institute. He was gay for a long time, and he got married then with a woman that was a lesbian, and they have kids now, and they have this ministry where they basically teach leaders and pastors and just how they can support and how they can care for people with sexual brokenness. And he basically told me that he wants me to train me and help me with my healing process so that I should go back to the US and live with him for a couple of months and just learn from their ministry and what they do there. So I decided to go, and I was like, sure, let's do this. So I go, and that's where I start this kind of like new process now that I know what's grace, now that I know that I depend on God, and kind of like everything that I learned the year before. Now I go into this phase of like, okay, now let's talk about my relational and sexual brokenness because it's there. Like it's not going anywhere. And I think part of what God wanted for me was to address that and understand a little bit more where this comes from. And here's where all these big questions start being answered. As as I was going through the process, one of the biggest teachings that I got while I was there was as I was talking with my new mentor, which was this guy, um, I shared with him that I was finding myself constantly dreaming about a different world, like a parallel universe. And he was just like asking me questions about why and all of this. And I was like, yeah, I identify that I do a lot of daydreaming, like just thinking about stuff. And in that daydreaming, I was imagining this different world where homosexuality was not sin
Mm.
and how happy I would be in that world. And I would keep kind of like that was a constant thought in my head, just like it would be amazing to live in a world where this is not sin and everything else is the same, but this specifically is not a sin, and I can live this, and I can be with God, and I'm just the happiest human being ever. And I think he was really wise in telling me that probably that comes from not trusting God.
Oof.
Because if I trust God, if I do believe that He has the best for me, if I think that takes care of me, and that everything that He does is for my own good, then I will understand that the world that I'm imagining is not good for me because it's not the world that God created for me. And if God said that
Wow.
homosexuality was a sin, then that's because it's the best for me. not the world that I'm imagining. And that kind of like really hit me because that went into now the core of, do I trust that God actually loves me? And not loves me in terms of accepting, because I already went through the phase of, I know He accepts me. But when I think about the future, it's like, do I trust that God, it's really looking for my own good? Is He really hoping that I have the best life here on earth? Or do I think about God as a God that is just putting me barriers and stuff to make my life harder and just to not enjoy my life,
Mm.
you know? Which was how it felt, like beyond the sin, like it was just like, this is so hard. Like it would be better for me if this was not sin. And that's a lie. That's a lie that even today I have to keep dealing with. And it's, I will not be better with this sin. And not because it is sin or because theology says that it's sin. It's because God created me and God knows who I am and God knows what I need. And within that, He designed me so that I would not be in a homosexual relationship, because that's the best for me. I think from that point on, that's something that I have to battle every single day. Every single day, I wake up and I have to decide if I'm going to trust God or not. Like, do I trust that He has the best for me, or do I want to do my own stuff? Kind of like going back to that thing of, I want to be my own God. I want to make my own decisions. That's the core struggle. It's not because I think also that process allowed me to understand, which was a huge help, to understand that me being attracted to men is not sin. And hear me out before jumping
Yeah.
to conclusions. Yeah, I'm not choosing to be attracted to men. That's not a decision or something that I'm choosing to do. I choose what to do with that feeling,
Correct.
but I don't choose to feel
What
it.
I feel.
So feeling it is not sin. Feeling it is not shameful, which that was another brick that they took out from my back of like, wow, like I was feeling guilt and shame just because I was out
Yeah.
in the street and I will see a guy and I'll be like, oh, this guy is handsome. And then I feel shame and guilt because, and I think that liberated me from all these thoughts of like, I'm not choosing this. I'm choosing what do I do with this attraction? Like I can act on it or not. That's my decision. And over that, there is sin or not. Like I can act sinfully or I could not. But the core feeling and the core um, attraction is not sin. It's just part of who I am. Now, knowing that it's not sin is not enough. Just I think it also opens the door to understand, why do I feel this and you don't feel this? Like there's a reason why I feel this, you don't feel this, and what can God teach me through this? And here's where the question why was answered into like, why do I experience this? Like, why me? Like, was I born this way, or was this a process of me getting into this? My own opinion, I'm not saying this is the final truth, based on what I've learned and based on that kind of like time of going deep into these struggles, my own conclusion is that no one is born this way. And this could be a complicated truth,
Wow.
because I think there's two realities here. I don't think God made anyone like that.
Wow.
I do think that God made us with different tendencies and with different ways of seeing life and different ways of um, interpreting other people's actions and interpreting other people's emotions. And I do think that we don't live in the world that we were meant to live in, because we live in a broken world.
Mhm.
So I think all these different factors of the broken world, the way we see life, the way we interpret what happens to our lives, to other people, build attractions and build different stuff that lead to this type of attraction. In my case, and it's only my case because I think each one of people that struggle with this have their own story. What I've been able to understand in my story was it goes back to that uh, gender dysphoria that I was experiencing, because the core of that experience was I was identifying myself with my mom and not my dad. And what happens is when you're young and when you're a kid, a critical part of your development is to identify yourself with the parent of your same sex. So if I'm a boy, I have to identify with my dad. If I'm a girl, I have to identify with my mother.
Mhm.
And that did happen to me. So as I grow up, the concept of men, it's a little bit far away from who I am because
Mhm.
I don't play soccer, and here all the men play soccer. I like to dance, and not a lot of men like to dance. Women love to dance, you know. I love romantic movies, you know. There's all these things that are not either bad or good, but it just uh, kind of like helped me feel like I don't belong to this group of men
Mhm.
which act different, which I feel that I'm more emotional. Men are not that emotional. Women are, you know. So of course at the beginning it's like I feel like I need to be a woman, not a man.
Mhm. Mhm.
That then changes because I feel like, okay, I am a man. I'm just a different man. Like I don't have these usual tendencies, mainly in Colombia, that if you have never lived in Colombia, Colombia is a very machista, is like very masculine. Like there's a really toxic masculine figure within the culture. And I think that also contributes to how I see the world and how I see myself. And yeah, as I grew up, this group of men was really, really far away from who I was. And when you see how God created us, God created every one of us with a need of connecting with women and with men. We all, as human beings, have the need of connecting with women and with men.
Mhm.
And most of that development occurs with your parents, like the way you relate with your father, the way you relate with your mother, or the lack of relationship in some cases that is there influences the way you relate in the future, which with each gender. So in my case, I didn't have tools to connect with men, but I needed to connect with men
Oh.
because God made that connection real. Like I needed that as a human being. I knew how to connect with women because I understand their emotions. I know how to talk with them. That was easy. But connecting with men was really complicated. So when you get to a later on to the adolescence, all the sexual part of your body starts to develop, and at the end the easy way to connect is through sex. So I'm trying to bridge this gap
Mhm.
that I'm feeling with sex, which seems to be the easiest way to not feel this distance that I'm feeling with men. um
Wow.
so it's a really interesting kind of like story, you know, because this is my story and each one of us has a different story on how they develop, but this is where it led me to be. And of course, part of what they told me that I needed to heal was the first thing that I had to heal was my relationship with my dad. Like they said, if you want to be healed from your homosexuality, you have to reconcile with your dad and you have to have a good relationship with your dad because that's where it started.
Mm.
So things like that were the things that I was learning to, and I did talk with my dad, and we solved the problems. And he asked for forgiveness, and I asked for forgiveness for the things that we did. And I think all of those things help in the process of learning how to connect well with a man, not being sexual, you know. And that's I think part of my own process of how to deal with this. Um, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. I think that gave me kind of like a lot of tools to also understand why other people struggle with what they struggle, and also to be able to empathize with everyone in their own journey on how to deal with this at the end. I think I've heard of people that suddenly they don't struggle with this anymore because God does a miracle. Um,
Or would you say in most cases people continue feeling that way, but they decide to not act upon how they feel?
I would say. I mean, I'm not saying this on data, scientific data, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard, I think it's more common to keep struggling with it than having this event where it disappears.
Mhm.
I think an advice that I got around this 2 years ago, which also changed my life, was that like I was having this problem of like, why cannot God just do this miracle? If He does miracles,
Why not?
He could just say, just remove it, and that's it. And then I was talking with one of my mentors in the US. She's one of the most wise women that I know. And we were talking a little bit about this. And she said, think about this. What what would give more glory to God?
Oof.
If we have a miracle of one day where you're healed, and it's amazing, and glory be to God for that miracle, or you choosing God every single day of your life, what do you think brings more glory to God?
You gave me goosebumps. Yeah, 100%.
And it was hard, but it was true. You know, it's like, it's not about, I think, also wanting that miracle to happen. It's a lot about myself. It's a lot about me being comfortable. It's a lot about the easy way, which if it happens to you, that's great. That's amazing. But I'm sure that's not the end of your journey. Like another struggle will come and another struggle you have to deal with. And like, it's not like you're going to get to a place where, oh, this miracle happened and now I'm a different person. No, like another one will come and then you have to learn through that, you know? In my case, I still think that God can do it. I don't think He will do it. And I'm okay with that because I know that I'm in a different journey and it's more about me choosing God every day, which I don't do it. You know, like there are days that I'm not choosing God in that aspect.
Mm.
Um, but how can I live a life where I'm choosing Him over, which I think that's faith, you know, at the end. I was talking with the same mentor and we were talking about faith and we were talking about this concept of like, how can I do this if I don't feel it? Like, how can I do this if I'm attracted to men? You know, like I'm not attracted to women. To some extent, I am, but not in the way that I'm attracted to men. And she told me that's faith. Like believing even if you don't feel it. Even if you don't feel that it is the way it is, you choose to believe that God is true, that what He says is true. Like it's not about sight, it's not about feeling. It's about deciding to believe that he is what he says he is. And I think that's the challenge. It's just everything within my body says something different. You know, I'm not there yet. Like
Mm.
everything in my body shouts for me to be homosexual.
Wow.
And I think part of faith is just choosing that what God says is true, even if nothing in my body feels it. He still
100%.
is true. So yeah,
Do
it's
you
been a long journey.
do you still pray to God, take this away from me? Because you said, okay, I've come
Sometimes.
sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know. I think I pray that when I'm tired, because I think
Yeah.
even with this whole transformation, even with all this understanding that I've been able to get, I still get tired. I still get places where I'm like, I don't want this anymore. Like it's just hard. It's hard to deny yourself. It's hard to not go with what you want. It's hard to not do what you're feeling that it would be good for you, you know? So there are times where I don't think it's as it was before, but I
Yeah.
think it's still there sometimes where I think that's where we keep knowing him, you know, like the struggle, like until we're in his presence, this will like sin will not stop and we will keep looking for him. And I think that's my own path of how do I get to know as I'm still struggling, as I still, even though in my head I know that what's good for me, it's hard to go that route when my body says something different. So yeah.
Wow. And what you said at the end with your mentor, where there could be a miracle or there could be just a testimony of how you choose God every day. And my mom, she was sick for 13 years and we prayed for
Mhm.
healing. it never came, and we started to lose hope and started to
Mm,
lose, like, maybe God doesn't want healing in her life. And then she passed away 6 months away. And until the very, very end, she kept living a life full of um, love towards God, and she would still preach people in the street God's love, even though she was super, super sick. And I
mm,
feel like probably her testimony, if she was healed, it would have been great. But then being fully committed to God and loving God despite her sickness, it was probably a bigger testimony, because she chose to love
yeah.
God despite feeling like, hey, why I am so broken in my body
Mm,
and why I'm so sick. So I don't
mm,
know if, like, I do believe, like, there could be a miracle, but if it doesn't happen, your decision of honoring God every single day, it's what probably builds up a lot of the people around you. Like, I think you're on a big mission, and it's so beautiful how that process has been, going through 30 years of your life, and where you are today, where, as you said, it's not solved. It's a constant battle, it's a constant struggle, it's a constant process of growing, it's a constant journey. And your relationship with God today, it's much different, much healthier where it was at the beginning. Even that process of you sharing with your dad, we didn't we didn't go that deep into that, but getting closer, and getting that healing, and the process of forgiveness with your dad probably
mhm.
brought a lot of healing as well. I think there's so many things that we could continue talking about this, but we're almost hitting a couple of
I
hours.
know.
I've got one last question for you, Santi. If if someone out there, like, is listening to this, and they are right now where you used to be, what would you say to that person? They're struggling, they're heading, they're searching, they're skeptical. What would you say to that person specifically?
I I th I think the first thing I would say is I'm sorry that you have to go through that. Like, I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's easy. Um, and I would say that there's only hope in God, even if you don't feel it. Like, I think we have to go beyond what we feel because the heart is tricky. We feel things, we have things, but I think what is trustworthy is God at the end. And as I said, I don't have everything figured out. I don't have everything already solved. I still sin. I still um, doubt about God's goodness for my life. But I would say that this life would be a lot more complicated if God was not there because we need Him. It doesn't matter if it's this sin or another. It's just a display of how much we need God in the midst of our lives. I think, and going back to your question, just to kind of like finalize, there's one story that always comes to mind when we talk about this concept of not only in my life, but when people are waiting for a miracle, that doesn't come, you know. And there's one story in the Bible about three friends. These friends are Daniel's friends, and that they are required to to worship this idol, and that if they don't do that, they will be thrown into the fire. And some of the conversation in that story is around, well, well, you believe in God. If you believe in God, God can be powerful to save you from the fire. And their response is, I believe that God is able to save me. But even if he doesn't, I'm not going to bow to this idol. And I think that's the key part of this process, like um it's been for years in my head and it makes me cry every time I think about it because I think that's where we have to stand, like I know God can do something. I don't doubt it that at any point. But even if he doesn't, I don't want to bow to that. I want to keep being faithful. Um I don't think it's easy. and I don't think it's fun. I think it's good. Um, so I would just say God loves you wherever you're at, and He wants to relate with you in every single aspect of where you're at, not where you wanted to be or not where you are hoping to be at some place in future years. Like He is where you're at, and He wants to meet you where you're at today. As He's meeting with myself every day, where in my doubts, in my conflict, where I don't want to do what He wants for me when I want to do what He wants for me. And I think He's faithful and He will do what He needs to do for us to not to be perfect, but to know Him and to depend more on Him. So that's what I would say.
That was beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing your story, for your time, your vulnerability. Words are never enough to say I'm sorry or I feel what you feel, because I only you know what you've been through, and only anyone
Mm,
else who struggles with this, listening to this, only they know what they're feeling. But as you were saying, there's a God out there, and He knows you, and He knows who you are, He knows what you
yeah.
need, and He loves you as you are. Thank you very much for your time. I had a lot of fun and a few struggles, with technology as usual. I loved the conversation. I learned a lot. You inspire me, Santi, in a few areas in my life that I think I need to work on. So thank you for opening up your heart. God bless you. God bless your life. God bless your whatever your ministry as you figure it out. I'm sure God
Mm,
will bless it because He knows your heart, and I can see the humility, I can see the love, like
mm,
I can feel your honesty and your love, like in your spirit, like that boy crying out to his creator. It's a long battle, it's a long fight, but
yeah.
my respects, my love to you, man. All the best. Thank you very much for this, and
Thank you.
big hat, my man.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you. I had so much fun, and I hope whomever is listening to this
Mm,
gets a little bit of hope in the process. It's great what you're doing here in this podcast, just showing how people around the world are meeting God, and we are all in a different path. We're all in different struggles, but we all need the same Jesus that died for us. So I just hope that this helps anyone that is listening. And remember that it's not over until it's over. I
100%.
love the chat. Thank you for inviting me.